So the kick is actually a composite of 3 different kick drums. This is going to be pretty common in most of the urban records that you're looking at. We've got this main kick. Then we've got this supplementary kick, which is just adding a little bit of texture to it. And then we've got a third kick down here, which is adding a lot of weight and a lot of power. So anytime we're working with layered kicks, we're going to want to check the phase. Normally when we're thinking of phase and phase cancellation and phase interaction, we're thinking of the one source being picked up by multiple microphones. And the different timings of different microphones can cause some phase anomalies to happen and some things that we maybe don't want. But the same can also be true for different sources interacting, particularly in the low end. When we have very simple wave shapes like the fundamentals of kick drums, if they're out of time, they're going to have phase interactions that are both constructive and destructive. So we always want to make sure that we're checking the polarity, checking the phase, and getting the best relationship between our drums. So the first thing I'm doing when I'm working with my kicks is I'm pulling up the virtual mix rack on all 3 kick drums, and I'm going to place a trimmer plugin on the very first insert. Now, whenever we're dealing with layered kicks, we're always going to want to check the phase. Normally when we think of phase and checking for phase, it's when we have one source that's recorded with multiple microphones. The little timing differences can cause some phase discrepancies. However, the same thing is also true for simple wave shapes, particularly low-end things like layered kicks or basses. So one of the things that I want to do is listen to how it sounds, and then experimenting with this little phase reverse knob. Notice when I flip the phase on this particular kick, the entire low end just suddenly goes away. That means that my kicks are in phase. So I'm going to try it with this other layered kick as well. Right, so clearly they're all better when they're in phase. However, that's not always going to be the case, so you're going to want to check to make sure. All right, so now let's start working on the kick itself. I'm going to focus mainly on this primary kick. I think that it sounds really good, but I'd like it to be a little bit sharper sounding. I want it to have a little bit more edge to it. So I'm going to pull up this 1176, and I'm just going to play around with it until I get the attack to kind of have this sort of like sharper, thwappier quality, for lack of a better way of putting it. There we go. So you'll notice that the attack of the kick is becoming pronounced. And the way that that's working is because the attack is set very slow and the release is set very fast, the compression is not acting fast enough to really rein the attack in, even though it's acting over the entire kick. And then because the release is very fast, it's pulling up as much of that sustain as possible. So the end result of that is that we end up with the same basic sounding kick, except for with an exaggerated attack. It's also fun sometimes to click in the circuit button too to see how that changes the tone of it. You can hear that that's actually a pretty pronounced difference. There's a lot more lower mid in this circuit too. But I kind of like the sharpness of the first one, and I'm going for sharpness, so I'm going to stick with that. So in this layered kick, there's a couple of tones that I don't really love. Like there's a lot of this sort of like boxy, thuddy thing going on that I don't really like. Probably somewhere in the mid-range. So I'm going to see if I can figure where that is and kind of cut some of it out. It spans a pretty wide range in the mid-range. It's everywhere from like maybe about 400 at the lowest to maybe as high as like 1K at the highest. But once we get into 1K, we sort of get into that like kind of knocky tone. So I'm going to sort of focus this around like 500, 600 hertz and then cut from there. There's also like sort of this like kind of papery noise that's happening in the upper mid range. I'm gonna cut some of that out as well. And because I've lost a whole lot of presence of this kick, I'm going to use the trimmer now to adjust and kind of get some of it back. All right, let's hear how that sounds in the arrangement.
Over, we're catching vibes. Pulling me closer, baby, I'm magnetized.
So let's hear how it sounded before and then after.
Over, we're catching vibes. Pulling me closer, baby, I'm over, we're catching vibes. Pulling me closer, baby, I'm magnetized.
So I think that's a pretty significant improvement right off of the bat.